Welcome to another ATP Geopolitics video with myself, Jonathan MS Pierce. This is the Frontline update without the news bit I normally have at the beginning. I've separated that off into a separate video, but please watch out. This Frontline update makes reference to stuff I said in that, like Gerasimov being tasked with taking the whole of Donbass by the end of March, and that could influence what we are seeing on the front line that I talk about. This is the Frontline update for the 17th of January 2023. Ukraine. Anyway, let's get to the front lines. First thing I'm going to look at is the shelling map. So this is produced by Defmon. Bit of shelling on the northern borders there. Around Kreminna, Ploshchanka, Chivano, Popivka, but fairly quiet really. Everywhere else up the Svatove line. Fairly moderate around the Bakhmut, quite a long line around there of the shelling. But then this is the most interesting thing for me. Like that looks like the Avdivka region, possibly Marinka a bit further south, but mainly Avdivka. So really heavy shelling around there. That's picking up and a little bit around Heliopol as well, and obviously all along the Kherson. The Dnipro, but that's an indication that things are somewhat quiet around the Svatove area, which is kind of borne out by reports. No reports doesn't even report anything apart from a tank being destroyed, T-90 tank being destroyed in Kazimivka. Some people saying that shows that Kazimivka is an important area for the Russians because they have a T-90 there and they don't have too many of them. It's a decent tank, but I'm not too sure that you can draw that conclusion. And he says the Ukrainians have developed something today north of Kreminna. News will come out once it's safe. There's been this talk for days now that something big's going on around Kreminna. Despite rumours, the Ukrainians are not fighting in the centre of Kreminna. Fighting is near Kreminna. Make of that what you will. Defmon says not too much going on here. I believe that the Ukrainian has the initiative in this area. That's the Svatove direction. Kreminna and Novoselivska are the hottest areas right now. There is a claim that Novoselivska. So let's go back to my map to the north. So we're going to the northeast to remind you where that is. That's this area here, northeast, going from Kupiansk to Svatove to Kreminna. First of all, there's an S-300 fired off from northeast of Starobilsk, but it kind of misfired in Novoskop or something along those lines, and it hit residential area there. So that was Russia's own missile doing that. Other than that, fairly quiet. The ISW reports, so the American think tank that accumulates lots of sources, the Ukrainian General Staff reported that Russian forces lack sufficient military equipment and personnel in the Kupiansk direction, so that's further up north, stating that one tank, this isn't talking about anything that's happened, so that's why I didn't report it, but this is worth noting, stating that one tank battalion of the 26th Tank Regiment of the 47th Guards Tank Division has only 30 personnel and 10 operating T-80 BV tanks remaining on the front line out of a regular complement of roughly 30 tanks and the personnel that should go with that. So if that's true, that's worth bearing in mind. That I'm wondering why that is the case and whether that shows there's a weakness up there. Novoselivska, there are reports and the reports came out yesterday that Ukrainians had pretty much gained Novoselivska here, just west of Kuzumivka. And then claims now from, we see in ISW, that there are special forces operating there. A Russian proxy source claimed that on January 16th, a Russian special forces element gained control over Novoselivska. So I'm not changing that on the map. The claims that Ukrainians have control, claims that Russia has control. Who knows? We shall see, but keep an eye out there. That is a hot area of activity at the moment, as according to a few sources, but really not a lot of other information until we get down to sort of Makivka, Ploshchanka, Chivano-Popivka, northwest of Kreminna. Ukrainian forces continue counter-offensive operations near Kreminna on January the 15th and 16th. UK MOD reported that fighting in the Kreminna sector continued over the weekend, noting that Ukrainian forces are continuing to advance on the eastern edge of Kreminna, so from the west to the west of Kreminna. Let's just show you. There's Kreminna, and you've got this, I think, Russian area of control here, including what looks like forested area there, but possibly that it's around here, just to the east of or northeast of Dubrova, Kuzmyrna, and in this forested area that you could be having Ukrainian successes around there. According to the Russia To Russian military bloggers, sorry, the Russians have conducted an unspecified offensive operation on the Ploshchanka-Makivka line, and that they have attacked Ukrainian positions in the Chervono-Popivka area. There's also reports that they have shelled Chervono-Popivka. That's what Rebar says. Rebar here says there are no significant changes. Artillery duels and positional battles continue along the line of contact. Russian forces are advancing in the Svatove Kreminna sector. No specific details about that, just advances. Yep. But that Chervono Popivka was shelled by Ukrainian formations. Now, if that is true, then that really does show that they have fallen back from Chervono-Popivka. They don't have control over it, and if Ryba is right, then the Ukrainians are now shelling Russian positions in and around Chervono-Popivka. So it could. I'm not really sure what's going on here. There seems to be some push and shove. There's a lot of pressure around the Makivka to Ploshchanka area from the Russians. It could be that the Ukrainians are on the back foot here somewhat, but then they seem to be on a front foot around Kreminna. So I don't know whether what that sort of signifies, and that seems to have been the case for the last week or so. And just to continue that, the Russian MOD claimed that Russian forces repelled a Ukrainian attack near Dobrova, and that's probably what Null reports is talking about, that kind of western area of Kreminna, attacks from that direction. Yeah, let's move on from there. Not too much else to report in the area, but as they say, as Noel report says, lots of sort of cryptic hints that something big is happening in and around Kreminna. Now, the Ukrainians claim an unsuccessful Russian attack on Bilorivka, so usual sort of situation around there. ISW reports that the Russians are still using a lot of drones around this whole front. And that's interesting because actually those sort of drones are commercial off-the-shelf drones rather than the Orlan 10s and 30s, which we haven't seen much of recently. I don't know if they kind of run out of stocks of them, but those ones that rely on battery operation struggle much more in sub-zero temperatures. So they are not as useful, and you'll see less activity of that sort. But the ISW says that despite challenges due to low temperatures and bad weather, the Russian forces continue to use those drones. Worth noting. Okay, let's move further south. There's been repelled attacks around Kupiansk and Spirina just here. So again, nothing unusual. Oops, there you go. Bit of 3D action for you. And then the ISW report that Russian source claims that a stronghold to the west of Brestova was taken by the Russians. Not sure about that. There's no evidence of that yet that I can find, but that could be something to watch out for, because as well as doing well around the Soledar and northern Bakhmut, in fact, the entire Bakhmut area, they could be trying to hit up here as well to kind of capitalize on that momentum. And that actually is worth sort of bringing this into play. So this is the idea that Seversk could be under threat, whereas Seversk is not too far away from Bakhmut, between Bakhmut and Kreminna. And if the Ukrainians are attacking, to the west of Kreminna here, there is a claim from certain quarters that the Russians are potentially preparing for a counter or an offensive around the Kreminna area. Well, actually, if it could be south of Kreminna into this pocket here towards Seversk, you could have a bit of a problem, because it would look something like this. So an attack from Bakhmut, an attack from maybe the Kreminna area, although it looks like the Ukrainians are pushing for Kreminna, could give a greater encirclement of Seversk and bite off this chunk here. And again, think about what Gerasimov has been tasked with doing. So this could fall into that, biting off chunks of the Donbass into achievable gains, so that he can get his March success. Anyway, there you go. As we come down to Soledar, we are in the understanding now, pretty much everyone has admitted that Soledar is now fully under the Russian hands. I've changed my Russian maps here. So Soledar has completely fallen to the Russians now, and it looks like Sil, which is this area just to the north, or Sol, called both, has also completely fallen. There's some geolocated footage of Russians in front of the town hall there. The station appears to have been captured as well. At least That's what the Russian sources say. So let's have a look at what people say. No report says Soledar is Russian controlled. The Ukrainians have taken new defensive positions on the higher ground to the west, added an elevation map. So today it was relatively calm in Bakhmut. Russian forces are forming assault groups to fully attack the city. Klishchivka is disputed. We'll talk about that in a minute. Here's your elevation map that I've shown you plenty of times before. You've got Soledar here. You have Sil would be on this railway line, and then just behind that you have the ground starting to rise, and the defensive positions have been taken behind this road coming down into Bakhmut. So that is this road coming down here. It gets onto higher ground here. This is the lower ground that the railway sits on. This is the railway, that sort of grey line going down there. But yeah, so that's what No Report says. Defmon says the Ukrainians repulsed attacks in the area of Rozdilivka and Sil and Bakhmut. I think it's a little bit more than just repelled. Russian forces were geolocated in the central parts of Sil, and most likely means Soledar is completely captured. The Ukrainians probably retreated to the fortified ground just west of Sil. So yeah, there is the admission there that Sil was captured. Rebar, pro-Russian. According to some reports, the village of Sil, north of Soledar, was completely taken by Wagner. In the town itself, the clearing of the underground passages where Ukrainian units may still remain continues. North of Bakhmut, Russian forces are attacking Paraskovivka, and there is fighting around Krasnohora. There is heavy fighting in Klishchivka, and the village allows fire control over the Chasiv Yar Bakhmut road and flanking Bakhmut from the south. We'll talk about that in a second. And this is what Suryat Maps has for their mapping of the area, just complete control now of Sil and Soledar. I've reflected that as well because I think that is the case from all the sources I have managed to look at. Yeah, that is bad news. Obviously, it's not great. One would hope, pro-Ukrainians would hope that they can hold this area, that there are entrenchments to give them some kind of defensive capability to the west of the highway. But down in Krasnohora, Blahadatny, Paraskovivka, I don't have too much detail about what's going on here. There's talk about, the gardens of Krasnohora and the Russians sort of trying to make their way through there towards Paraskovivka, but again, not much detail added on from yesterday. Same with Pidorodna, that is under Russian control, but I don't know if they're struggling to get any further west. Doesn't seem to be much progress there, given that there's progress most other places. And then we come on to sort of the main part of Bakhmut and the eastern suburbs. This source claims that to the north of the town, Russia has advanced about 550 meters, to the southeast about 300 meters. That's their appraisal. I would say that's broadly about right. There is, fighting still on Maximienko Street. There's talk that the Russians have made some gains around the garbage disposal plant here, but I don't know about any further details. Fighting, I haven't heard about anything since we heard about fighting going on in the art winery complex there. As we come down to Opitny, they have pushed further on. There is talk, and I've moved my maps accordingly. There's talk they're fighting around this road here, the Mali Trotsky lane, just coming into Bakhmut itself. So Opitny is further down here, and that is now completely under control of the Russians. Sorry, I'm having real problems with feeling my fingers today. So yeah, this is a worry because actually, you're talking about street-to-street fighting now looking like taking place on the eastern, northeastern, and southern suburbs of Bakhmut. Sorry, just to confirm, this is what Suryat Maps is saying, talking about the Trotsky Provluk Street or Mali Trotsky Street, where the Ukrainian army has retreated after the fall of Opitny, and that the DPR and Russian army, again, no mention of Wagner. So again, it makes me wonder whether this is just Suryat Maps is just in the payment of the Kremlin. Enter the first buildings in the south of Bakhmut city, and that's their map. And I'd broadly agree with that from other sources. So as we go on, Klishchivka, I reported last night that on my extra video, so some who only watch my frontline updates will not know this, but might not know this. Klishchivka was claimed to be taken yesterday by Russian sources, and indeed there was, I think, a Czech volunteer who had written that Klishchivka was lost, and that was talked about by some of my sources. I can't find that now. It's been deleted. It's not there. So I don't know whether that was Russian disinformation because you had claims that then came out that even from Wargonzo that no, Klishchivka hasn't fallen, and you've got the heights there behind which have entrenchments. Probably the best guess is contested. But the early Russian claims seem to have been a bit overstated. Defmon says Ukrainians repulsed attacks around Klishchivka and Mayol. Some Russian channels claim they captured Klishchivka, but other Russian channels claim the statement is premature. It's possible that they captured parts of the town, but the Ukrainian hold the fortified ground to the west of it, the ground I keep talking about. And here's another here. Today, Klishchivka has become a field of fierce battle. You could say Solidar 2.0. The Russians want to capture the town at the cost of the very heavy losses and take the road to T0504. There are three main directions of attack. So here you can see that this is a representation of all the kind of entrenchments built. Actually, this blue area there is the main area of entrenchment and fortifications that are built. But attacking just to the east of the canal that's coming down here, a frontal attack of Klishchivka there, and then trying to come around to the northeast. So what that looks like is pretty much this. So the Russians attacking around here to try and get behind and then take on the fortifications, a frontal attack there, and obviously, you know, classic pincer coming around the side there. And this is why it's important they get this ground up here to give them the ability to encircle around here. But of course, they're getting dangerously close to real sort of fire control over this road here and getting towards Ivanivska. It is a worry because Klishchivka is super important for, you know, this supply road into Bakhmut, and then indeed further attacks towards Alexandro here and towards Konstantinivka. Again, you know, what are the intentions of Russia here? Did they have genuine belief that they can make this Donbass advance by the end of March? I don't know. But if they need to do that, they need to get a shift on. And this is going to be exceptionally important. These are just fields here. You know, yes, there will be entrenchments in places, but there isn't a lot between Klishchivka and Ivanivska. If you include the entrenchments just behind Klishchivka. So super important. And Syriac maps here saying that the Ukrainians are looking to possibly retreat into the entrenchments behind Klishchivka, but they don't have, and this map I think came out after the claims that Klishchivka had fallen, so they don't think it's fallen. I don't think Klishchivka has fallen either, but there will be, you can bet your bottom dollar that Russia will be piling in resources to Klishchivka now that they've kind of sewn up the Solidar area to some degree. And they're probably going to concentrate, I don't know, maybe on the Krasnohora area to push so that they can get this strangulation going on the ground lines of communication and Bakhmut as a whole. Right, let's move on to the south. Okay, when it comes to Avdivka, so we come further down south, not a lot of news of anything going on, particularly down south of Bakhmut, between Bakhmut and Donetsk. But as we come on to Avdivka here, there are some interesting claims from some pro-Russian sources about Vodyanye here. So Vodyanye is this place that has held out where Opitny here, the one, this Opitny, not the one in Bakhmut, has been taken by the Russians and they have control over that. Vodyanye holds out, and that allows Pervomaisky to broadly have some protection, and also allows Avdivka to have a buffer zone so they can't be encircled to the west here. So Vodyanye is important. Defmon says that the usual sort of repelled attacks in all these sort of places, Vodyanye included, Marinka, Podyedya, Novomakhalivka, words, and down towards the southern Donetsk region as well. Rebar says nothing about Avdivka. No report says the appointed so-called head of Donetsk People's Republic, also known as the occupied Donetsk region, Denis Pushilin, claims his forces took control of Vodyane, north of Pisky, near Donetsk city. The claim is unverified, but it is, you do see it pop up. So here, Global War Monitor says that Russia is also advancing the neighboring village of Opytny by 900 meters to capture approximately 1.25 square kilometers of land. They've controlled this village since 17th of November and have moved since then, and shows some advance in Vodyane as well. Which is hugely important. The Syriac map says 327th day of combats began with the Russian army and DPR forces restarting their advances north of Donetsk airport and expanded the buffer zone north of Opytny town and took control over the remaining part of Vodyane. So whether that first source was taking it from here, we've got area to the north of Opytny and then Vodyane mainly appearing to be under control of the Russians. That would be a serious, problem, I think, for the Ukrainians. There's obviously a lot of open ground between here and Avdivka. These are the killing fields here, so it's not like they can just simply march into Avdivka. But Vodyane is important it's important that it holds out, and the Russians are claiming control over the main part of the town now, or the village. So we shall see how that develops. That might be bad news, and it might fit into the remit of Gerasimov again, saying, right, we need renewed attempts to get Donbass because I've got to get it by March, otherwise my head's on a chopping block. When it comes to all other places around the Donbass and the map, there just isn't much to be said. Russian mill bloggers reported elements of the Russian army are fighting difficult battles to advance in Marinka, but the Ukrainian forces are repelling Russian attacks so far, and then fighting around Krasnohorivka, Pobieda, Vodyane, and Marinka, and Bakhmutivka. So lots of sort of small repelled attacks going on in the usual places, but nothing particularly noteworthy going on. Kherson still getting shelled, as we saw from the shelling. And actually, here's something I forgot to say yesterday. So these are links I should have shared with you. So initial reports coming in that air defense system is on fire near Tokmak in Zaporizhia. The S-300s have been used as offensive weapons in the region. Recently, more have been moved, presumably from Crimea via Melitopol, not known if the cause is a Ukrainian hit or Russian smoking. So this is possibly an air defense system that has been taken out in Tokmak area. That is really good news. They have the capability of firing a lot of these rockets, and they do consistently against places like Zaporizhia, the city. And indeed, this is what happened not last night, but the night before to Zaporizhia. This is shelling. President's office published photos of the consequences of night shelling on Zaporizhia. Remember, this is a civilian town, so this is civilian areas. Clearly, this is not a military target, as far as I'm concerned. So we appear to be seeing, more war crimes. So Zaporizhia itself has been hit there, as it is quite often, and also Mahanets and Nikopol just down south from Zaporizhia. So you can see here, this is Tokmak, some air defense system possibly being hit around there. Zaporizhia being shelled, not unusual. Marinets and Nikopol often getting shelled, and that's where we see, these sort of pictures coming from. So although there's not a lot of troop activity along this front, there's always artillery duels going on, and always sort of missiles going one way or the other. And there was also, over the last few days, there's been quite a lot of drone activity going towards Sevastopol, and this has been caught on camera. There's been, air defenses working. I don't know that there's been any success, but it's a case of keeping the Russians on their toes there. Is that just a continual waste of those kind of drones, or are they wasting the air defense missiles and just testing for weaknesses for the Russians? I don't know. So as the ISW states, 10 Ukrainian drones near Sevastopol in the Black Sea were shot down. No indication that any of them hit their targets. Russian forces continued efforts to develop new logistic routes between Russia and southern Ukraine, likely to disperse their lines of communication against Ukrainian strikes. The Russian occupation head of Kherson Oblast has claimed that Russian authorities have finished restoring the Henichesk Arabat Spit Bridge, improving Russian transport logistics. Saldol also claimed that occupation authorities are constructing a large road connecting rear areas in Kherson, Zaporizhia, and Donetsk Oblast to Crimea and Rostov on Don. So this is the idea, I guess, that Ukrainians have done some damage to the logistics of the Russians, and that has really hampered their war efforts, including the Kerch Bridge, railway strikes, because there are only very few rail connections to Crimea. So they are having to do some work on improving those logistics. The bridge that connects it, there's a spit that goes all the way down. You can see it here. That's the Arabat spit that goes all the way down the length of Crimea. Up there, so they've been working on a bridge in the Henichesk area. So yeah, things are happening. The Russians are obviously, very cognizant that Ukrainians can deal quite incisive blows with relative ease to their ground lines of communication all around this area, and so they're working hard, obviously, to diversify their logistics routes there. Anyway, that's all I have to say. Sorry about my fingers today, and please like, subscribe, and share. Thanks for all your support. Really appreciate that. And watch out for the Ukraine War Update Extra video coming out later. All the ways to support my channel are in the description below. Thank you so much. Take care.